Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today, I have somebody that I think you're going to really love. And I think he's got some things, no matter where you are, what you're doing, I think you want to listen to this, because one of the things that if you know my story, is that I always undervalued the power of public speaking. It was kind of the thing I was good at. I had the soft skills. The people around me had the hard skills. They got paid more. They seemed better. And I just devalued what I brought to the table. And then I went to TED and I had these two huge realizations. One is, wow, that's powerful. That kind of public speaking is insanely powerful. And it dawned on me a little later, this is what we're programmed to respond to. Through eons of evolution, some person standing up in front of the group and speaking, that's powerful. So that was the first thing I got. The second thing I got, I think to my credit, is I realized I had not been doing that, right? I'd been doing public speaking, but I had not been doing public speaking at that level. And that was the thing, if you know my story, that just pushed me into what I'm doing now, that I love, that I feel like is my reason for living, and that has been very good to me. And so that recognition of the value of public speaking, and then the willingness to go out and get yourself on stages. So who we're going to talk to today is a gentleman named Grant Baldwin. And he came to me through Mike Michalowicz. So I know a lot of you know and love Mike Michalowicz like I do. So thank you, Mike. Yet again, the patron saint of SpeakLikeALeader.show brought me Grant Baldwin. And Grant is the founder of thespeakerlab.com, where he teaches speakers how to get booked and paid to speak consistently. Grant, welcome to SpeakLikeALeader.show. Thanks for joining us.
John, thanks for letting me hang out with you, man. This is going to be fun.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. And I don't remember the number, but how many people have you helped? It said on the footer of your website somewhere.
Yeah. We've worked with thousands and thousands of speakers all over the world. We've worked with speakers in every U.S. state, 49 different countries around the world. And the reality, like John, as you well know, that there's no shortage of people who are interested in speaking. And some people who want to do it full time, do it as a career. Some people that want to do it as part of their existing career or their business. And so whether you want to speak a ton or a little bit, and even if you're not really sure what you want to speak about, we work with speakers at all different ages and stages of it.
That's awesome. I used to have a coach who would say, look, it's great that you've got this unbelievably important, powerful message to get out to the world. If you can't make a business out of it, it's not going to go very far.
Right.
So this, taking control of getting yourself booked and paid consistently, I love Ron Finley was the gangsta gardener from TED, from his TED talk. And he said in that talk, the funny thing about sustainability is you have to sustain it. So I think,
yeah, I want to go back to something you said there as far as like treating this like a business. And I think that's where a lot of speakers struggle, is the way that a lot of speakers kind of get into speaking is they were invited to speak to something here or there. There's word of mouth, something fell in their lap. They did a gig or two. They're like, that was really fun. I would love to do more of that. So I guess now I just sit back and I wait for the phone to ring again. And like, that just does not work. And so speaking is very much a momentum business, and you have to treat it like a business. And so if you want it to just be a hobby, that's fine, but you cannot put in hobby effort and expect business results. And so the speakers that you look up to, you admire, you respect, you're like, oh, they're killing it. They're getting top dollar for their speaking fees. Like, it's because they treat it like a business and not just some type of pastime or hobby that they hope will magically work out.
Yeah, boy. So good. So listen, I don't want to ask you for all your secrets, but I want to delve into some of the things that you talk to people about. Before we do that, let me just ask you about any leader who had some important communication for you that you still remember today that's made a difference for you. Does anybody come to mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of leaders that have impacted my life and have affected the trajectory of my life. One early on was actually my youth pastor. So way back when I was in high school, I was really involved in my local church. My youth pastor had a big impact in my life, and that was kind of the path I was on. I actually went to Bible college. I was a youth pastor myself at a different church for a little while, and that gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. He was one of the best speakers that I had seen, and I was like, I just want to do that. Like that seems super, super cool. And so not only from an impactfulness on just my life personally and who I was, but also just from like a speaking standpoint, like that boy, he could just take people on a journey, and like that was phenomenal. I want to do that. That just seemed like a really cool gig. And so, yeah, he was absolutely a leader that from a personal on the stage and off the stage presence, he really had a big impact in me.
So what's one of the specific lessons, any of them? I mean, it could be character, it could be public speaking. What was one of the big things you took away from him?
Yeah, I know that he really genuinely cared about me off the stage, and it wasn't something that he was just doing some type of dog and pony show from the stage. And so I think that's an important note for any speaker, is that if you're amazing on the stage, but you are a jerk to people off stage, or there's just like this incongruency, like people are just like, like that's not right. And not even just like in terms of audience members, but anyone, the event planners, the AV, the tech team, like you want to be amazing. We tell speakers all the time, you want to be amazing on stage, but you want to be just as good off stage. Because listen, if you're amazing on stage, but you're a pain in the butt to work with, or you're a diva, or you're a prima donna, like people do not want to work with you. They want to work with people who are just like genuinely good human beings. And so be authentic on stage in terms of what you're bringing and presenting, but also just be that same authentic person off stage as well.
Boy, amen, brother. I've worked with probably 35 plus TEDx events, and still, have a lot of friends in that community. Boy, I'll tell you, if you're a prima donna speaker, word spreads quickly, and you don't get invited onto that stage. And I think it's the same everywhere. I know that when I go speak, I feel like it's almost table stakes. Of course I'm going to do a great speech and the audience is going to love me. Like if I don't do that, I'm not getting invited anywhere. But so that's kind of handled. That's kind of almost an assumed. I feel like my real job is to have everybody I interact with just go away just having had an excellent experience of me, particularly the meeting planners and the people who put the microphone on you, and the people who are running the sound and the lights, and I feel like that's the real job.
Yeah, from an event planner standpoint, you think about it, they have hundreds and hundreds of different things that they're thinking about as it relates to an event, and the speaker is one of those. Now, the speaker is an important part of it, but it's just one part of it. And so, the easier you can be to work with, and the simpler you can make things for them, the more likely they're going to want to be to work with you in the future, to recommend you, to refer you, to bring you back for additional events. So, John, you mentioned you've worked with a lot of different TEDx events there, and you could probably remember some amazing speakers who are just a pain in the butt, and you're just like, I just wouldn't recommend them. And you can probably remember some speakers who were amazing offstage. They were incredibly gracious and kind. They were thoughtful. They were caring. They were authentic. They were compassionate. They were awesome to work with. They were professional, and they were solid on stage. It wasn't the best speaker you've ever seen. They weren't the worst speaker, but you're a lot more likely to recommend this speaker. This speaker was great because they were so great off stage. And so I remember years ago, I was working, I had an assistant at the time who would help with a lot of speaking gigs I was doing. And I would always remind her, your role is so incredibly important because of the ease it makes it for the event planner and the decision maker. So the easier we can make their life, then the more likely they're going to want to be to work with us after the fact. And so I would always kind of joke around, if we're amazing to work with, I can be mediocre on stage. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to be mediocre on stage. I'm trying to bring my absolute best. But it was just it kind of lowered the pressure, because it's just it's the experience of working with the speaker, and so much of that is what happens off stage rather than just on stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Okay, so can we talk about one of my biggest pet peeves for a second? Just see what you have to say about it.
I'm excited to see where this is going.
Okay, but the biggest one, and I guess maybe it's partly because of what I do, but this is just one of the most disappointing things to me ever, and frustrating and aggravating. It makes me mad. When I go to a restaurant that has an incredible view. You know, I used to live in LA near the beach. There's all these wonderful restaurants up and down the coast that have these gorgeous views. And then they have mediocre food. And they can get away with it. Like they've been in business for years doing that and they get away with it. And I'm making an analogy to those speakers who've done something totally amazing, right? And then they're just have such a totally mediocre speech about it, right? The thing they did was totally unbelievable and cool and exciting, but their speech is so,
Yeah, no, there's a lot of restaurants that you think of. Like I was thinking of like a Hard Rock Cafe or like a Planet Hollywood. Some of these that are like, they have a shtick to them, and that's something that brings people in the door. And then you taste the food. Yeah, the food's fine. It's not horrible. It's not amazing, but it's the type of thing you're like, I'm not coming back. Versus like, I'll give you an example. Like one thing we tell speakers all the time is that your best marketing is a great talk. Your best marketing is a great talk. And so I live in the Nashville area, and there's a place about half hour from me called Baja Burrito. And Baja Burrito is this little hole in the wall place that all of the tables and chairs in there are like lawn chairs, and they're like these old plastic. Like I don't even know that this place could pass a health code inspection. I mean, it's just like it's a mess in there. But there's always a line out the door. I would drive 30 minutes out of the way to go to Baja Burrito because the food is so good. And like, there's nothing special about the environment or the ambiance or anything, but the food is amazing. And so you think about, like, again, to your point, like a restaurant, you know, if the restaurant has an amazing view, or even like, let's go the opposite direction. Let's say like the food is absolutely amazing. It's the best food that you've ever had, but you know, like the service sucks and the waiter's rude and it takes forever to get your food, and you know, on and on the list goes. You're just like, I mean, it's good, but like, do I want to put up with that? And there's a level like you will put up to a point, but eventually you're just like, it's just not worth it. And so if a speaker's amazing, but they're a pain in the butt to work with, you're like, it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, no. And then though, think about those people who've done that amazing thing, go to the trouble to really craft and deliver a fabulous talk, and are still excellent to work with. Like that's, you know, that's a high five moment.
Totally. Yeah. And those are the speakers that build a career out of this, and they stay at it for years and years and years because they're great on stage and they're great off stage.
So what are some of the things that, you know, that people come to you when they don't already have a big speaking career, but let's say they're doing something really amazing in the biotech space as a startup entrepreneur, or they're running a big division for a multinational corporation. Like they're doing something, they're already pretty good at public speaking, but let's say that I've just poked them in the ribs and said, hey, I think you need to be on more stages. I think you need to do more public speaking to develop yourself as a thought leader and get that attention and that following. What do those people show up like? What are a few things you would tell them if they're listening, or what are some of their misconceptions when they come in, or anything like that?
Yeah. So what we do with all the students and clients that we work with at the Speaker Lab is we teach what we call the Speaker Success Roadmap. So it's a 5-step process that makes the acronym SPEAK. So let me just like kind of quickly go over that at a high level view, and then we can kind of dig in wherever you want. But before we get there, let me kind of go back to one thing you mentioned as well is, you know, sometimes speakers who they have some type of resume, they have some type of credentials. And so I think oftentimes that can be a misconception or a limiting belief that speakers think, I need to have some type of story. I need to have accomplished something crazy in order to be a speaker. I had that same limiting belief when I got started because I'm a white male from the Midwest who grew up in a normal middle-class family. Like there is nothing on paper that you'd be like, oh, well, I mean, of course that guy's a speaker. Like that makes sense. Like that's not the case at all. So I'll give you an example. There was, I remember early on in my speaking career, I met a guy who was a phenomenal speaker, since become a good friend. And he had cancer as a child, had a leg amputated, and went on to become a one-legged downhill skier in the Paralympics. Wow. And I hear this and I'm just like, I can't compete with that. Like, dude, I got none of those things, right?
Yeah.
And so we think in order to be a successful speaker that we need to have, won a gold medal, or we need to have cured cancer, or we need to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner, or we need to, climb Mount Everest in our shorts. And like, it just, that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of great speakers that don't have some type of amazing resume like that. So all that being said is kind of a baseline. Let's go back to like that SPEAK framework, that SPEAK. So the first part of the process, S, is select a problem to solve. Select a problem to solve. So there's two key questions that every speaker needs to answer. You got to be really clear on who do you speak to, and number two is what problem do you solve for that audience. Now, the mistake a lot of speakers make here is we feel the need to spread this net as far and wide as possible. And so who do you speak to? I don't know, man. I speak to people. I speak to humans. My message is for everybody. Well, we all understand, like, if it's for everybody, it's really for nobody. So you got to be clear on who it is that you speak to. In addition, the second question there is what problem do you solve? Now, again, this is where I'll talk with speakers sometimes. I'll say, hey, what do you speak about? And they say, well, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. It's like, that doesn't work. So one thing we always tell speakers is you want to be the steakhouse and not the buffet. The steakhouse, not the buffet. And here's what we mean by that. So John, let's imagine you and I are going out to eat. We're looking for a good steak. We've been talking about restaurants. And so we have a choice. We could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 things that they offer, and they're all mediocre. Or we could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really well. They don't do seafood, they don't do pasta, they don't do tacos, they don't do cupcakes, they do steak, and that's it. And again, it's counterintuitive, but the more narrow, the more focused you are, the easier it is to try to be able to find gigs that are right for you. So that's the first part of the process is S, select a problem to solve. The P then, prepare your talk. Get really, really clear. What's the solution that you're offering to the problem that the event planner or decision maker has? And this can come in the form of a keynote or a workshop or a breakout or consulting, or it could come in person, it could be virtual. There's a lot of different options there of how you provide the solution. The E is to establish yourself as the expert. So two key marketing assets every speaker needs is you need a website and you need a demo video. So in this day and age, if you don't have a website, you don't exist. It's hard for people to take you seriously. The second thing is you need that demo video. Now, what exactly is a demo video? So think of it like a movie trailer. Before you go see a movie, you want to see the trailer. And a movie trailer is you take a 2-hour movie and they boil it down to 2 or 3 minutes. And within those 2 or 3 minutes, you have an idea of who's in it, what's the plot, what's the theme, what's the movie about. And the goal of the movie trailer and the goal of the demo video is to make people want to see more. And so an event planner or decision maker is most likely not going to feel comfortable hiring you unless they have some level of confidence and ideally that they've seen something from you. And so a demo video can fit that mold. Next part, A, is to acquire paid speaking gigs. Now, this is the part we want to fast forward to. Like, dude, just tell me how to book gigs. But if you don't have these other foundational pieces in place, it becomes really difficult to be able to book gigs. And when we talk about booking gigs, this means that you have a proactive system that you are using to book gigs. And that's what a big thing that we teach our students is not being reactive, because a mistake some speakers make is going, okay, I have my website, I have my demo video, and now I just sit back and I wait for the phone to ring. Like, listen, that does not work. Like, your mom is thrilled about your website. She's going to tell both of her friends, but nobody else cares. And so it's very much not a, if you build it, they will come. It does not work like that. So at this point, again, we have to be proactive and starting to reach out to potential decision makers and have a system to follow up. And then the last part of the process, K, is know when to scale. Know when to scale, meaning a lot of people who are interested in speaking are also interested in writing a book or doing a course or doing coaching or doing consulting or doing a podcast or doing a YouTube channel or doing any number of things. And you can do all the things, but you can't do all the things at once. Something's going to come first, something's going to come last. So you got to be really, really clear about how speaking fits into the mix and how you want it to be a part of your business. So again, I know we covered a lot of information there, but that's kind of the high level view of the speaker success roadmap that we teach our students.
It makes perfect sense to me. I think it's super awesome. And I think you said where we were going to go next, but I forgot where we were going to go next. Do you remember? Probably our listeners.
No, where like from there, where if you want to jump in from there and where you want to go from there, if you want to dig into any of that.
Okay, so yeah, so for these people that I think public speaking could be great leverage, I think that last one is in some ways a place for them to start, to know where this fits in, right? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily when to scale. They're already like super busy with their day job, but how would speaking fit into them and their plans for becoming, more of a thought leader in the arena, which would be good for them ultimately long-term and good for their business as well. So
Let me jump in on that. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, because like one of the great things about speaking, John, as you well know, is there's a lot of flexibility to what it can look like. Meaning there are some speakers that do 50, 75, 100 gigs a year. And there's probably people who are watching or listening going like, that sounds amazing. I would love to do 50, 75, 100 gigs a year. And other people are like, nope. No, thank you. That's not appealing. Or I've just got a lot on the plate and I just don't have the bandwidth for it. And I like speaking, but I don't want to do it that much. And I'd love to do, I don't know, 5 gigs, 10 gigs, maybe one a month. Like that's also acceptable. There's not a right or wrong answer of how many gigs you have to do. Like, again, you get to design and choose what the business looks like for you. So when we talk about that K part of, figuring out where speaking fits into the mix, I know speakers who 100% of their business is speaking, and that's all they do. They don't care about books. They don't want to do consulting. They don't want to do coaching. They don't want to do anything else. And other people who say, I do a little bit of speaking here and there, but then I'm really focused on consulting or coaching. I'll give you an example. There's a speaker I talked to just recently. He had joined one of our training programs about 10 months ago. And he is a business owner. He works primarily in the construction industry. And he teaches construction companies about how to better implement systems and processes for running their business. So if we go back to one of the things we talked about earlier, that like with restaurants, they may have amazing food, but everything else sucks, or vice versa. People don't want to go there. And the same thing is true with construction companies. If you build an amazing house, but you're a pain in the butt to work with, it's hard for people to want to work with you. So he helps them with their systems, processes, and make sure that not only is their product good, but there's the process of working with them is an amazing experience. So when he goes and speaks, he's not trying to necessarily I'm trying to, necessarily get a check for that gig. Now he does get paid and gets paid well for it, but the win for him is on the back end of attendees or audience members who may hire him and his company to do some type of training, consulting, implementation of his work. And so for him, speaking is much more about recognition. It's much more about brand awareness within the marketplace. It's much more about some of the prestige and authority that he can have as a speaker, and also just from a lead gen standpoint for the other parts of his business. So again, all that to say, and one, just to kind of put a bow on that, he had joined our program about 10 months ago, and he told me the other day, he's booked 40 gigs since joining, which is an insane amount. That's not necessarily normal, but just like he getting after it and booking gigs. But he talked about like how it has completely transformed his business, not necessarily from a speaking standpoint, but from the coaching and training business that he has for construction companies. The amount of business that is generated for that has been astronomical because of the speaking. So again, all that to say, there's a lot of versatility in how to use speaking depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think what you just said, that example is a perfect example of one of the big things I'm pointing at. And, I work with a founder of a biotech company who came to me because his one of his competitors in a similar area had booked a TEDx talk, and gotten to give the talk. His competitor talked about all the stuff that he had been working on, right? Because, I mean, parallel tracks, not like any stealing, but like talked about all this stuff that he'd been thinking about so much, but had never gone out and talked about. And then they raised, a month after that, they raised this huge raise. And he was like, I got to get out there and talk about this, So I think that's, those two examples, I think, frame it up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about speaking in general, and any conference or event that any of us have ever been to. Like any speaker that is up on stage, there's again a certain amount of recognition, of authority, of credibility that we ascribe to that person. And so, even if you're someone who's just like, I don't know if it makes sense to get paid for it, or am I trying to get paid for it? Or I just want, is it worth to just speak? Yeah, like it can absolutely make a lot of sense for you in your pond to become a go-to authority and expert just because you're speaking in that space.
Yeah. So now, one of the other things that I think about a lot, and I just love to have you riff on this with me, is I actually came up with a thing I call the Bates equation of public speaking, because I'm not super creative and I'm slightly narcissistic, maybe, I don't know.
Perfect. But, give it to me.
The Bates equation of public speaking. So it goes like this: 1 times 20 times 3,000. So that's 60,000 minutes when I'm speaking for 20 minutes at a TED Talk, let's say, to 3,000 people. So let's divide 60,000 minutes by 60. We get 1,000 hours of human life that I am responsible for when I speak for 20 minutes to 3,000 people. And I don't want to prepare.
Right.
Oh, really? Yeah, well, I'm good at winging it, and I could never be as in the moment and, genuine if I practiced, and I'd come across robotic, right? Well, I mean, dude, that's a lot of time to kind of take for granted like that. And the other thing is, like, when I speak, I'm speaking to people I could never afford to pay them all their day rate to come listen to me speak, right? But somebody's not only paying them their day rate, they've flown me in, they've rented the building, they've paid for everybody to fly in, they're covering all of our meals and expenses. What I say better darn well be worth all of that times 10 or 100 or 1,000, or I'm not going to get invited back very often.
Right. Yeah, I 1,000% agree with that. I think that the best speakers on the planet are the ones that tend to spend a ton of time practicing, preparing, rehearsing, going over their material time and time and time again. Now, you may watch them and think like, oh, it looks like they're just winging it. It's because they've spent so much time practicing and preparing and rehearsing that it looks like they're just going through the motions. But in reality, like, everything is very, very thought through and crafted and well timed. So let me give you another example. Let's think through like a sports analogy. So if you look at some of the best athletes on the planet, let's take in basketball, like a LeBron James. Okay, he's one of the greatest basketball players of all time, and he's phenomenal at what he does. He's a huge human specimen who is very naturally talented and very athletic, but he also spends hours and hours and hours in the gym practicing, lifting weights, going over drills like time and time and time again, so that by the time he gets up on the court, sure, he could just go through the motions and never have to practice at all, and he'd probably be better than you and I and most people. But to be some of the best, like, he really spends the time to practice, go over it time and time and time again. Let me give you a quick story on this. I heard this from a speaker friend of mine, Alan Stein Jr., and so props and credit to him. But he comes from the basketball industry. He's a phenomenal speaker, but comes from the basketball industry. Used to do some like coaching training with NBA players, and so he had an opportunity several years ago to attend a coaching kind of training session, workout session with Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant, this was years ago when he was still at the top of his game, and he attends this training session with Kobe Bryant, and he notices that Kobe is doing like all these like really basic fundamental footwork drills just over and over and over and over and over and over. And so afterwards he asked him, he said, "Hey, Kobe, you're one of the best players on the planet. Like, why are you doing all these basic footwork drills?" And his answer was, "Why do you think I'm one of the best players on the planet?" Because he just does the fundamentals so stinking well. And so the best speakers on the planet, they're not like, I'm just going to scribble some napkins on or some ideas on a napkin and hop up there. Like, they really take the craft seriously. And the same thing is true with like a good example is comedians. If you want to see a really good documentary, there's a documentary called Comedian. That's the whole title, Comedian. You see
that?
That
changed my life to see that.
So good.
It was so good. Yes.
Here's kind of the premise of it. If you haven't seen it, I know it was on Netflix at one point. Before it was on Netflix, I just bought the DVD because it was that good. But
it's really
the premise is basically like it's about Jerry Seinfeld. And after the TV show Seinfeld ended, even before that, like, Seinfeld is a comic. He's a stand-up comic. He still tours to this day. He's a phenomenal comedian. And so the TV show Seinfeld has ended, and he's wanting to get back on the road and do comedy and put together his next special that we would see on like a Netflix today. Okay. Yeah. And so what he ends up doing is you see all the behind the scenes of really like how the sausage is made. And so people oftentimes assume like, oh, Seinfeld's funny, so he just hops up on stage, opens his mouth, and funny things happen. And it just doesn't work like that. Like, no. Whenever you are creating a story or a talk or comedy, you are making an educated guess I think this is funny. I think this will make sense. I think this will resonate, but I have no idea until I get up in front of a live audience. And so he has some ideas of like, I think these are funny bits, but I'm gonna have to go work it out and test it out in front of people. And so what you see is the behind the scenes in this documentary of him getting up on stage in front of a small group of 50, 100 people in a comedy club, and he's telling jokes that are not funny. And again, he is the height of fame right after Seinfeld has ended. He's telling jokes and he's forgetting the punchline. He's forgetting where I'm going. He's just losing his train of thought, and he's just workshopping. He's just trying things out. And so again, when it fast forwards to months and months later, when he performs kind of the big marquee event that's recorded, that's going to end up on Netflix or wherever, people assume like, oh, he's just funny and he just hops up there. But the documentary comedian shows behind the scenes of all of the practice and preparation that it takes to lead to the big marquee event in the end.
Yeah, that was just, it blew my mind because he's like not that funny all the time, you know, like there's these little nuggets out of each performance and he just keeps doing it and gathering the little nuggets, but it takes 45 minutes of pain to get a 5-minute nugget. And then by the time he gets to the Netflix special, it's just all the funny nuggets, right? Mm-hmm. And, I don't know if you know this, but a good friend of mine who used to work with him very closely for years told me Steve Jobs, once they finished writing and crafting the talk, he would practice it for an hour for every minute he was going to be on stage. And he probably learned that from somebody else who did it named Winston Churchill. So anyway, not to beat the practice thing to death, but boy, that's one of the big differentiating factors, though. I think it's worth saying that again. I know fabulous speakers, and people talk to me about them all the time because they know that I work with them. They know that I know them. They know that I coach them. And so I hear how fabulous they are. And a lot of people just assume they are just that good without having any idea how much preparation, hard work, practice goes into that,
Right. Yep, absolutely.
So listen, total swerve here. What was one of the lowest points of your career and what did you learn from it? Can I ask you that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just in general, there are highs and lows. There are days that go well. There are speeches that go well. There's events that just like, dang, that was awesome. Like, why can't they all be like that? And then sometimes you're just like, that sucked. Like that just didn't go well. And it was a disaster. And I don't want other things, like travel is one of those things that you can't control. You can't do anything about. And there's days that are super smooth and days that you're just like, man, I just want to go home. I just want to be in my own bed.
Yeah.
And so, like I can tell you just a couple of like random stories of times where an event hasn't gone well, for example, not like end of the world type stuff, but just like, that sucked. I remember years ago, I was getting started as a speaker. I did a lot in the education space. So I did a lot speaking to like high schools, colleges. And so I remember speaking at a high school one time, and it was like the day before spring break. And so it was like an end of the day school assembly. And so the only thing standing between these high school students and spring break is me. And they're like, nobody wants to hear me speak at that point. And so they're like, dude, wrap it up and let us go on spring break. And so I remember partway through the talk, there's the voice that comes over the loudspeaker for the whole school and is dismissing the girls volleyball team. They had a game that afternoon. You may head to the locker room to get your stuff and then head to the bus and head to your away game, right? So I'm speaking in this school gymnasium of hundreds and hundreds of teenagers. And all of a sudden, you got a couple dozen teenage girls who stand up from all over, and they're just leaving. Right, so nobody's paying attention. Everybody's distracted. Yeah. Well, at that point, then you also got a couple of dozen teenage guys who are just being dumb and silly, and they're like, I wonder if I can just sneak out. So you have a bunch of guys who stand up. They start leaving as well. So you have everybody like, you got a bunch of people kind of coming and going in the middle of this. And I'm just like, what the heck am I doing? And it was one of those things where it was like, it wasn't necessarily the thing I did wrong other than like, that sucked. Like, let's not do that again. I remember speaking at something one time and it was at a hotel in New Jersey. And there was this nice Hilton property and they were doing some construction outside the hotel and the power was cut to the entire hotel. No power at all within the whole hotel. And it was right before I was getting ready to speak in the event, and I was talking to the event planner. I was like, "Hey, I'm good to go. Let's still do this." And there was, I don't know, I was doing like a workshop with maybe 100 people, and it was an interior room. There's no external lighting at all. And so I asked everyone, like, "Hey, just turn on the flashlight on your phone and just leave it on." So we got a couple, 100 people there or something. And I didn't have a mic or anything. I'm just kind of shouting and projecting. And it's just like one of those, like, well, the show must go on. You got to make it work. I remember one time I was speaking at something, and a dog came running into the room, and this dog is like zipping around. You got a couple hundred people in there. Nobody's paying attention, and you're kind of like watching that, like, is the dog going to bite someone or jump on someone? Like, what's going to happen here? And it's funny and just bizarre at the same time. And so, like, you, as a speaker, like, those things happen, where it's just like, that sucked. I don't want to do this anymore. And that was something that was just a, crazy situation or whatever. But, like, again, that's part of it. And those things make you better speakers. They make you, better at the craft of what it is that you're doing. And that's, that's part of it. Some days are like that.
Well, let me pull some other lessons out of that, because I think there's great stuff in what you said. The first one, do your best not to speak on the final day of school. Like, that's, do your best, right? And if you have to, good enough. But then the other one is when the power went out, I'm good to go. Like, number one, yes, the show must go on, right? There's a performance element to public speaking wherever you are, I think, that is just so powerful when people get it. That the show must go on. I'm responsible for how this is going to turn out. It's on me. I'm owning it. Right. So that's one. Number two is, it sounds to me like, one of the things I tell people all the time is, when you have like a tech glitch or something goes wrong like that, if you get upset about it, everybody will get upset about it. Yeah. But if you don't get upset about it and you just roll with it and laugh it off, everybody else will roll with it and laugh it off. Like, they're gonna mirror you. Yep. So good on you that you're like, hey, turn on the flashlight on your phone and let's just do our best here. And everybody's like, oh, okay, right, bingo. If you would have been all upset and frustrated and stormed around, that would have turned out differently. Same thing with the dog, right?
Yeah. I totally agree with that. That the audience takes their cues from you. Yes. And so when something happens that, let's say, I can think of times where I was speaking and the mic stopped working. The batteries run out or whatever happened. And everyone's quickly like, what's he going to do, or how's this going to work? And if you make it like it's no big deal, then it's no big deal to the audience. I've had times where I was speaking and I just lost my train of thought, and all of a sudden I'm just like, I don't know what I was talking about, right? And I remember times where I remember asking a lady on the front row, I was like, what was I saying? I was telling a story. What were we talking about? And if it's no big deal to me, it's no big deal to the audience. But if all of a sudden I get super uptight and uncomfortable, then it makes everybody feel like, oh, this is painful to watch.
Absolutely true. And I know speakers who will purposefully pretend they forgot.
Yeah.
Just to engage the audience, to have them be listening and, have them re-engage with, oh yeah, this is what he was saying and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So that's classic. Yeah.
I saw something. I went to see a speaker friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and he's a phenomenal speaker. And so he did something like partway through the talk where he basically started kind of like, interacting with a guy on the AV team at the back of the room, and he was like it was almost like the AV guy like messed up an audio cue or something, and so then they're kind of interacting, and I'm watching this and I was like, oh man, how's he, this weird situation, how's he handling this? And then partway through I'm realizing like, this whole thing was set up. But it was not necessarily like in a manipulative way at all, a gotcha way, but it was just like a break in the action, and he turned it into this really cool moment. And I was like, dude, I was talking with him afterwards. I was like, I don't know where you're going, but like, that was cool. That was really cool. It was just like this pattern interrupt for the audience. And so, doing some of those things where like, you forget what you were saying, or there's something that happens out of the ordinary that you run with. Like, those moments are very raw, real, and natural for an audience.
Well, just one more thing on this, forgetting what you say, because I know it comes up for people a lot. Like, it's one of the things people are definitely worried they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
I got some great advice. years ago about that. And actually from two different sources that I'll combine together. So the first piece is Craig Valentine. You may know him. He's a fabulous speaker. He was kind of an early mentor of mine, somebody I follow closely, learned a lot from. He has something he calls the powerful pause. Mm-hmm. Now, you do that purposefully, but you can also do that when you forget what you're going to say. Just do a powerful pause. And the secret is just look deep. Mm-hmm. While you're not saying anything. You just look deep, you're quiet for a minute, then it comes back to you and you keep going. The other piece that I would add to that is that if you do forget what you're saying and you pause and you do the powerful pause, the answer is never in here, like looking into your own brain, like rolling your eyes back in your head and trying to figure out what you were going to say. The answer is always over there in the audience. Mm-hmm. Engage over there. Just look more deeply as you're being quiet in your powerful pause, and what you were going to say next will show up in somebody's face over there,
Yeah. Well, another thing I think it's important to remember, if you lose your place, you forget a story, you tell things out of order, it's okay. Like if you are, let's say you're at a sporting event singing the national anthem and you forget the lyrics. Everybody knows you forgot the lyrics. They know what the lyrics are supposed to be. And so they know that something was wrong. But if you forget a story, you tell a story out of place, you forget a point, you're supposed to give 5 points, you gave 4 points, or you got them out of order. Like, nobody knows. Nobody's following along with a script and they're like, wait a second, hang on, let's go back.
Yeah, bingo.
That just doesn't happen. So if you lose your train of thought and you kind of you got to kind of spin your way out of it and go a different direction, nobody knows any different.
Yeah, totally true. Totally true. Listen, we're getting to the end of our time here. I don't want to go yet, but I want to ask you, is there anything I didn't ask you? Is there anything else that you think
I got a question for you.
Talk about? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I got a question for you. All right, so you come from the TEDx world. I know you do a lot in the TEDx space, and I think I'll give you my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think that a lot of especially newer speakers way over-index on TEDx and what they think is going to happen. I absolutely think TEDx is valuable. And totally do it. But a mistake that some speakers make is thinking like, I'm just getting started, so I'm gonna do a TEDx talk, and then it's just gonna blow up for me. And that they've seen that happen with a few speakers, but that is not necessarily the case for the majority of speakers. And so a lot of speakers do a TEDx talk, and they may get 1,000 or a couple thousand views, but it's not like hundreds of thousands or millions of views. All of a sudden, it's going to change the trajectory of their career. So what would you say to speakers whenever it comes to their expectations of what a TEDx presentation is going to do for them?
Well, first of all, I would absolutely agree with you, especially TEDx events.
Correct.
Like if you're going to speak at a TEDx event and you've got so much of a following that you can drive your video viral, and it's going crazy because of your following, then TED will pick it up because it's going viral and they may amplify that.
Yep.
But if you don't have that following already, that's much less likely to happen just because you did a TEDx event. And I think TEDx is wonderful. I love TEDx. Do a TEDx if you can do it. If you can get on the TED stage, do it. That's awesome. And there are a few things I would say, but the big thing in the vein of this is I think it's much more important to create a TED-like talk that is super awesome, that's short, like maybe 11 to 12 minutes, like maybe not even 18 minutes. Create that unbelievably pithy, one idea we're spreading, awesome TED-like talk, and then give that thing anywhere. And see if you can't give it someplace where they'll record it really well, and then you can put it up online. And Grant, I got to speak at TED a number of times on side stages, and I've spoken at a bunch of TEDx events. And my very first time on a stage at the TED conference, I blew it. And it was so bad that if you Google John Bates TED fail, I am the first result. And what I did really, really wrong, I wrote an article that'll come up and you can see it. But the first thing is I did it for myself. I came with a selfish motivation, not like evil selfish, but definitely selfish, right? Like I wanted to quote unquote sell my book. I didn't have a book, but it was about me. Huge mistake. The other thing I did is I had a very short, TED Talks can be as short as 3 or 4 minutes. I think I had 4 minutes, and I tried to cram a bunch of stuff in. Yeah. And as Craig Valentine says, when you cram your information in, you cram your audience out. I tried to land a bunch of points. I landed none. Yeah. Right. I didn't get what I later found is the most important coaching TED ever gives anybody, which is what is your one idea we're spreading, not your top 3 or your best 5. Make sure you've got a singular idea that you are supporting and communicating. And I definitely think that people over-index on TED and TEDx now. Like, do it. It's great. Support it. Totally. That's awesome. But it's much more about giving wholeheartedly of your whole self to a one idea we're spreading, succinct, well-delivered, well-crafted, well-practiced, incredibly well-delivered talk, and give that wherever they'll let you give it,
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Cool. Good. All right. So anything else that I didn't ask you or anything else you'd like to say?
Hey, this has been a ton of fun, man. I appreciate you letting me hang out with you. If people want to find out more about what we do, everything we do is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. If you listen to this podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts. We have a podcast by the same name, the Speaker Lab Podcast, and we've got over 400 episodes there, so a lot of great content there. We talked through that Speak framework real quickly. We got a book called The Successful Speaker, 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, and Building Your Platform. And so that's definitely worth checking out if you want to dig deeper and how do you find and book gigs. And in fact, right now, we're actually giving out free copies of the book. And so if you go to thespeakerlab.com, I think you just pay a couple bucks for shipping, and we'll send you a free hardcover copy of the book. So thespeakerlab.com.
Absolutely. And we're going to have the Speaker Lab in the show notes. We'll have a link to that. And I definitely think that to circle back to near the beginning of our conversation, I really think it's a great idea wherever you are, whoever you are, you're involved in business. If you're involved in business, if you've got something that you specialize in, that you care about, talk about it. Like, it's just a great way to start laying the foundation for your future. If you talk about it a little bit now and it goes really well and you love it and you want to, you can grow it into something else. You could turn it into a lead generation thing. I've had a lot of people from, I've got one of my most fabulous testimonials is from a guy who does, fire and water and mold remediation, who took one of my cohort-based courses, and he says it changed his life and it made him dramatically more successful at communicating about what he did and closing deals, Yep. And yep. I just think that, especially with the leverage that social media and video on the internet and the expectations of people today, getting out there as a speaker, it's just such a great opportunity. And who knows, right? Maybe you're really busy in that high level corporate executive job right now. Well, do some speaking. Make sure you have a website where you can list who you are and stuff, because one day you might leave that job and you might want to step more fully into your thought leadership or whatever. But it just opens so many doors. Yeah. I think that's one of the greatest things.
Yeah, even if you don't want to be a full-time speaker, there's absolutely huge value in speaking. And again, the credibility, the authority, the recognition that we talked about can definitely move the needle for you.
Yeah. Awesome, Grant. Well, listen, I think we'll talk again. I really appreciate you joining me on speaklikealeader.show today. I also really appreciate you sharing everything, and I highly recommend that people check you out at thespeakerlab.com. And if you're interested in this and you would like that book, I think that would be a great offer to take advantage of. And so, Grant, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it, man.
Glad to have you. And to you listening, thank you so much for listening. If you think that this is something worthwhile and you know some people you could share it with, we'd certainly love to reach more people with these good messages. And if you've got a minute and you could give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast and tell people why they might like it, that would be awesome. And until next time, Thank you for joining us on speaklikealeader.show. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.